Imagine picking up the phone, hearing the voice of someone you love, and then never hearing from them again. Not after an argument, not after a warning, just silence. On a cold evening in March 1989, 23-year-old Jennifer Calloway made a phone call that would become the last confirmed contact anyone would ever have with her. She was standing at a gas station payphone just outside Clarksville, Indiana, speaking to her mother about dinner plans, her voice calm and ordinary. And then the line went dead. Jennifer wasn't the type to disappear. She was a nursing student at Louisville University, responsible, ambitious, the kind of daughter who called home every Sunday without fail. Her mother, Patricia Calloway, would later describe Jennifer as her anchor, the one child who always kept her promises. Jennifer lived in a small apartment near campus with her roommate, Sarah, and worked part-time shifts at a local diner to pay for textbooks. She had plans, she had dreams. She had a future that seemed as solid as the ground beneath her feet. But all of that would shatter in a single night. That evening, Jennifer had borrowed Sarah's car to drive to her boyfriend's house about 40 minutes away. She'd made the drive dozens of times before, knew every turn, every stoplight. Around 7:30 p.m., she called her mother from that gas station payphone. Patricia remembers the conversation perfectly, every word now etched into her memory like a scar. Jennifer said she'd grabbed snacks, that she'd be home late, that she loved her. Then Patricia heard something strange, a sound she couldn't quite place like muffled voices in the background. Jennifer's voice changed, became quieter, almost cautious. She said, "Mom, I have to go," and the call ended. Patricia didn't think much of it at first. Young people hung up quickly all the time, always rushing somewhere. But when Jennifer didn't come home that night, didn't call the next morning, didn't show up for her shift at the diner, the worry began to spread like ice water through Patricia's veins. Sarah called Patricia around noon the next day, her voice shaking. Jennifer's car, the borrowed car, had been found in the gas station parking lot where she'd made that phone call. The keys were still in the ignition. Her purse was on the passenger seat, wallet intact, money untouched. But Jennifer was gone. The Clarksville Police Department treated it as a possible runaway case at first, a decision that would haunt the investigation for years to come. Detective Raymond Fuller, a veteran officer with 20 years on the force, took Patricia's statement with what she later described as disturbing indifference. He asked if Jennifer had problems at home, if she used drugs, if she'd been depressed. Patricia's answers, all negative, all desperate, seemed to bounce off him like rain off stone. "Young women leave sometimes," Detective Fuller told her, his voice flat with routine. "They need space, they come back." But mothers know, and Patricia knew her daughter hadn't left willingly. The gas station attendant, a 19-year-old named Marcus Webb, remembered seeing Jennifer that night. He'd been working the counter, half watching a basketball game on a small television when she walked in around 7:15. She bought a Coke and a bag of chips, seemed perfectly normal, even smiled when she paid. Marcus told police he saw her walk back to her car, saw her make the phone call, but then his attention drifted back to the game. When investigators pressed him for more details, he mentioned something else, something that should have set off alarm bells immediately. He thought he saw another car pull into the lot shortly after Jennifer went to the payphone, a dark sedan with tinted windows. But he couldn't be sure, he hadn't been paying attention. Days turned into weeks. Jennifer's face appeared on local news broadcasts, her photograph stapled to telephone poles across 3 counties. Patricia organized search parties, distributed flyers, called every hospital within 100 miles. Jennifer's boyfriend, Daniel, a quiet engineering student, broke down during his police interview, swearing he'd been home that night waiting for her, that he'd called her apartment repeatedly when she never arrived. His alibi checked out. Everyone's alibi checked out. It was as if Jennifer had stepped through a door into nothingness, leaving only questions and that terrible, lingering phone call. What had she heard? What had made her voice change? Who or what had been in that parking lot with her? The investigation stalled almost immediately, crippled by assumptions and bureaucratic indifference. Detective Fuller filed reports, conducted interviews, but his heart wasn't in it. He'd already decided Jennifer had run away, perhaps to escape family pressure or relationship troubles, and the evidence or lack thereof seemed to support his theory. No body meant no crime. No witnesses meant no suspects. The case grew cold not because it was unsolvable, but because no one with power believed it needed solving. Patricia Calloway refused to accept this. She became a fixture at the police station, calling every week, demanding updates, refusing to let her daughter become another statistic lost in bureaucratic filing cabinets. But something else was happening, something Patricia didn't know about, something that would eventually crack this case wide open. In the months following Jennifer's disappearance, 3 more young women vanished from the same general area, all within a 50-mile radius of Clarksville. March turned to June, June to September, and each time the pattern was similar. A young woman, early 20s, last seen at night. Car found abandoned, no signs of struggle. The local media began whispering about a possible connection, but police departments, protective of their jurisdictions and reputations, refused to coordinate. Each disappearance was treated as isolated, unrelated. No one wanted to admit that something far darker might be unfolding across their quiet towns. Jennifer's case might have remained frozen forever if not for a woman named Dr. Catherine Mills, a criminal psychologist from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. Dr. Mills had been tracking patterns of disappearances across the Midwest for years, building databases when others saw only random tragedies. In late 1989, she noticed the cluster of missing women in southern Indiana and requested the case files. What she found shocked her. 4 young women, similar age range, similar circumstances, all vanished within 7 months, all last seen near highways or gas stations, and all within the territory of long-haul trucking routes that crisscross the region like a spider's web. Dr. Mills called Patricia Calloway personally, and for the first time since Jennifer disappeared, Patricia felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. Dr. Mills brought a different lens to the investigation, one informed by cases that local police had never encountered. She believed they were dealing with a serial predator, someone who used the highways as hunting grounds, someone who understood how to exploit the gaps between jurisdictions. She explained to Patricia that many serial offenders targeting women along highways were truck drivers, men with legitimate reasons to be anywhere, men whose vehicles were both weapon and escape route. The theory made terrible sense. Jennifer had been at a truck stop gas station, the kind of place where big rigs filled up for long hauls. The dark sedan Marcus had mentioned could have been wrong, a mistake in memory. It could have been a truck. Dr. Mills pushed for the cases to be officially linked, and finally, in January 1990, a task force was formed. Detective Fuller, now forced to take Jennifer's case seriously, sat across from Dr. Mills with barely concealed resentment as she methodically dismantled his runaway theory. She pointed out details he'd missed or ignored. Tire tracks near Jennifer's abandoned car that didn't match her vehicle. A witness statement from a trucker who'd stopped at the same gas station and seen a man talking to a young woman by a phone, though he couldn't describe the man clearly. And most damning of all, a pattern of similar unsolved disappearances stretching back 5 years along the same trucking routes. Cases from Kentucky, Ohio, Illinois, all filed away and forgotten. The task force began re-interviewing witnesses, starting with Marcus Webb at the gas station. This time, with Dr. Mills asking the questions, Marcus remembered more. He'd seen Jennifer at the payphone, yes, but now he recalled that someone had approached her while she was talking. A man. Tall, wearing a baseball cap, moving with casual confidence. Marcus hadn't thought it strange at the time. People talked to strangers at gas stations all the time. But now, looking back, he remembered something that made his stomach turn. The man had placed his hand on the phone cradle, cutting off Jennifer's call, and Jennifer's face had changed from calm to confused, then to something else. Something like fear. Why hadn't Marcus mentioned this before? The answer was as simple as it was frustrating. Detective Fuller had never asked the right questions, had never created an environment where details mattered. Marcus, young and uncertain, had answered what was asked and nothing more. Now, 11 months after Jennifer vanished, Marcus was finally telling the full story. He remembered the man leading Jennifer away from the payphone, toward the darker end of the parking lot where the big trucks parked. He remembered thinking it looked like they knew each other, the way the man's hand rested on her shoulder. But Jennifer's body language, now that he really thought about it, had been all wrong. Stiff, resistant. The body language of someone being controlled, not comforted. Dr. Mills conducted cognitive interviews with every person who'd been at that gas station, using techniques designed to unlock buried memories. A truck driver named Harold Jensen remembered seeing a blue semi-truck parked at the far end of the lot that night. Unusual because it had been idling for over an hour, engine running, wasting fuel. Harold had noticed because he was a driver himself, and letting a rig idle that long was expensive and strange. He remembered thinking the driver must be new, must not understand the costs. But what if the engine had been running for a different reason? What if someone needed to make a quick escape? What if someone knew exactly how long it would take to make a person disappear? The investigators pulled truck stop logs, fuel receipts, weigh station records. It was tedious work, the kind of investigation that required patience and resources local police departments rarely had. But Dr. Mills was relentless. She cross-referenced every commercial vehicle that had been in the area on the night Jennifer disappeared with similar vehicles present during the other disappearances. The list was enormous at first, hundreds of trucks crisscrossing the highways on any given night. But as she narrowed the parameters, focusing on trucks present at multiple disappearance sites, the list began to shrink. 50 trucks, then 20, then finally just 7. And one of the 7 belonged to a driver named Robert Eugene Marsh. Robert Eugene Marsh. 42 years old, divorced, a long-haul trucker for 16 years with a clean driving record and no criminal history. He hauled refrigerated goods across the Midwest, a lonely job that kept him on the road 3 weeks out of every month. His dispatcher described him as reliable but quiet, the kind of driver who never caused problems, never complained, just picked up loads and delivered them on time. Neighbors in his small Ohio hometown said he kept to himself, lived in a modest house at the end of a gravel road, didn't socialize much. On paper, Robert Marsh was invisible, unremarkable. But Dr. Mills had learned long ago that monsters rarely look like monsters. They look like everyone else. The task force began surveillance on Marsh in February 1990, watching his routes, tracking his stops, looking for any behavior that matched their profile. For weeks, nothing happened. Marsh drove his routes, slept at truck stops, ate at diners, behaved exactly like thousands of other drivers on America's highways. The team began to doubt. Maybe they had the wrong man. Maybe this was just another dead end in a case full of them. But Dr. Mills insisted they wait, watch, be patient. Predators like this, she explained, often went dormant when they sensed attention, when their instincts warned them of danger. And Robert Marsh, she believed, had very good instincts. Then, on March 8, 1990, almost exactly 1 year after Jennifer Calloway vanished, Marsh's behavior changed. He deviated from his usual route, pulling into a truck stop outside Lincoln, Nebraska, a location that wasn't on his manifest. Surveillance teams watched as he parked, entered the convenience store, and struck up a conversation with a young woman fueling her car. The woman appeared uncomfortable, kept glancing toward the store entrance as if looking for escape. Marsh moved closer, his posture friendly but his positioning strategic, blocking her path. And that's when the tactical team moved in, not to arrest, not yet, but to intervene, to prevent what they believed was about to happen. The woman's name was Amy Richardson, 21 years old, driving home from visiting her sister. When officers approached, Marsh immediately backed away, hands up, claiming he'd just been asking for directions. Amy told a different story. She said Marsh had complimented her car, asked if she was traveling alone, offered to check her tire pressure because one looked low. She'd felt something was wrong, had been trying to politely decline when police appeared. She couldn't explain why, but she was terrified. And in that moment, the task force made their decision. They had enough for a warrant to search Marsh's truck, his home, his entire life. What they found would confirm their worst fears and break open a case that spanned nearly a decade. Inside Robert Marsh's truck, hidden in a custom-built compartment beneath the sleeping berth, investigators found what they would later call a murder kit. Zip ties, duct tape, a hunting knife with an 8-inch blade, sedatives in unmarked bottles, and a Polaroid camera with film. The sleeping berth itself showed signs of hasty cleaning, but luminol testing revealed blood traces, lots of them, layers of blood that had been scrubbed away and replaced with new blood over and over. The truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was a mobile crime scene, a prison on wheels, a nightmare that had been rolling across America's highways for years. But it was what they found at Marsh's home that truly revealed the scope of his crimes. The house itself was neat, almost obsessively clean, with minimal furniture and bare walls. But in the basement, behind a false wall that took investigators hours to locate, they discovered a room. A small, windowless room with a concrete floor and a drain in the center. The walls were lined with soundproofing material. A single metal chair sat bolted to the floor, and on a shelf, carefully organized, were Polaroid photographs, dozens of them. The faces of young women, terrified, bound, trapped in that very room. And among those faces, finally, heartbreakingly, was Jennifer Calloway. Patricia collapsed when investigators showed her the photograph. Her daughter, alive in that moment, staring at the camera with eyes full of fear and desperate hope. The photograph was dated March 15, 1989, 6 days after Jennifer had made that final phone call from the gas station. 6 days? Jennifer had been alive for 6 days after she vanished. 6 days of unimaginable horror. 6 days of waiting, hoping, praying that someone would find her. But no one had. The investigation had moved too slowly, had dismissed her disappearance too quickly. And Jennifer had paid the price with her life. Robert Marsh was arrested and charged with 4 counts of kidnapping and murder, corresponding to the 4 women from the Indiana cluster. But as the FBI dug deeper, as they traced his roots and cross-referenced unsolved disappearances, the number grew. 8 confirmed victims, then 12, then 18. The photographs in Marsh's basement became a horrific gallery of America's missing daughters, women whose disappearances had been filed away as runaways, accidents, mysteries. Women whose families had spent years in limbo, not knowing whether to grieve or hope. And now, finally, they had answers. Terrible answers, but answers nonetheless. During interrogation, Marsh showed no emotion, no remorse. Dr. Mills sat across from him, trying to understand the psychology of a man who had turned human beings into prey. Marsh described his crimes with clinical detachment, explaining his methods as if discussing truck maintenance. He targeted women alone at night, approached them with friendly concern about their cars or directions, offered help. If they accepted, he'd suggest they follow him to a better lit area or a garage he knew. If they hesitated, he'd use force, quick and efficient. The phone call, Jennifer's phone call, had been interrupted because she'd been describing the gas station to her mother, and Marsh realized she was creating a record of her location. He'd cut the call short, told her there was a problem with her car he'd noticed, and when she went to check, he'd made his move. The trial of Robert Eugene Marsh became national news, a horrifying testament to the vulnerabilities in America's system for tracking missing persons. Families of victims filled the courtroom, some finally getting closure, others devastated by confirmation of their worst fears. Patricia Calloway testified about that last phone call, about the year of searching, about the failures of the initial investigation. She looked directly at Marsh as she spoke, demanding that he see her pain, that he acknowledge what he'd stolen. But Marsh's face remained blank, empty, as if he was watching something happening far away and of no concern to him. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before delivering guilty verdicts on all counts. Marsh was sentenced to 18 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole, 1 for each confirmed victim. The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Hathaway who'd presided over murder trials for 20 years, said something during sentencing that would be quoted for years afterward. "Mr. Marsh," she said, her voice shaking with controlled fury, "you exploited the very systems meant to protect us. You used our highways, our open roads, the symbols of American freedom as hunting grounds. You relied on the fact that young women travel alone, that they trust strangers offering help, that police departments don't talk to each other. You counted on our disconnection, our bureaucracy, our failure to see patterns. And for years you were right, but not anymore." The Marsh case led to sweeping changes in how law enforcement tracks missing persons and unsolved disappearances. The Highway Serial Killings Initiative was established, a national database that tracks violent crimes committed along major highways and identifies potential patterns. Training programs were developed to help local police recognize signs of serial predation. And perhaps most importantly, families of missing persons gained advocates, support systems, and most crucially, the assumption that their loved ones mattered, that disappearances deserved serious investigation from day one. Jennifer Calloway's name became synonymous with these reforms, a tragic catalyst for change that would help prevent future tragedies. But for Patricia Calloway, no policy changes could fill the void left by her daughter's absence. Jennifer's remains had been found on Marsh's property, buried in a wooded area behind his house, along with the remains of 7 other victims. Patricia had finally been able to bring her daughter home, to lay her to rest properly, to have a place to visit and remember. She established the Jennifer Calloway Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping families of missing persons navigate the legal and emotional maze of their situations. In interviews, Patricia would often say that Jennifer's last act, that phone call, had been her salvation. The call created a timestamp, a location, a piece of evidence that ultimately led investigators to her killer. Jennifer, in her final moments, had been trying to save herself, and in a way, she had. The story of Jennifer Calloway forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about safety, about trust, about the invisible predators who move through our world wearing masks of normalcy. How many times had other drivers seen Robert Marsh at truck stops, sat near him at diners, passed him on highways? How many people had spoken with him, never sensing the darkness he carried? The answer is thousands. Marsh had been hiding in plain sight for years, protected not by cleverness but by our collective failure to look closely, to connect dots, to take the disappearance of young women as seriously as we should have from the very beginning. Dr. Catherine Mills continued her work with the FBI, using the Marsh case as a teaching example for new agents and local police departments. She emphasized that most serial predators aren't criminal masterminds. They're opportunists who exploit weaknesses in systems and trust. Marsh hadn't been particularly intelligent or careful. He'd left evidence, been seen by witnesses, followed predictable patterns. But he'd remained free for years because no one was looking, because each victim was treated as an isolated incident, because jurisdictions didn't communicate. The failure, Dr. Mills would say, wasn't in detection. It was in assumption. We assumed young women ran away. We assumed they made bad choices. We assumed their disappearances weren't connected. And those assumptions cost lives. In the years following Marsh's conviction, some of his surviving family members spoke to journalists, trying to make sense of the man they thought they'd known. His ex-wife, Linda, said she'd divorced him because he was cold, distant, absent even when he was home. But she'd never suspected violence. His sister, Margaret, remembered a troubled childhood, an abusive father, a mother who disappeared when Robert was 12, simply walked away and never came back. Psychologists would later theorize that Marsh's crimes were twisted reenactments of abandonment, attempts to control the one thing his childhood had taught him was uncontrollable, the presence of women in his life. But understanding motive doesn't create forgiveness. It only adds layers to tragedy. Patricia kept Jennifer's bedroom exactly as it had been the night she disappeared. The nursing textbooks still stacked on the desk. The poster of Madonna on the wall. The diary on the nightstand, the last entry written the morning of her disappearance, talking about an exam she was nervous about, a movie she wanted to see with Daniel, her plans for spring break. Reading those words, so ordinary and full of future, breaks something inside you. Jennifer had no idea that she was writing her last thoughts, that within hours she would be fighting for her life in the back of a stranger's truck. None of us know when ordinary moments will become final moments. That's the terrible truth at the heart of stories like this. The gas station where Jennifer made her last phone call no longer exists. It was torn down in 1995, replaced by a strip mall that eventually closed, leaving only concrete foundations and faded parking lines. But people in Clarksville remember. Local historians have talked about placing a memorial there, a small marker acknowledging what happened, honoring Jennifer, and the other victims whose paths crossed with Robert Marsh. Patricia supports the idea, believes that remembering is crucial, that forgetting makes it easier for history to repeat itself. But some residents oppose it, uncomfortable with memorializing tragedy, worried about property values and dark tourism. The debate continues, unresolved, a small echo of the larger tensions between memory and comfort. Daniel, Jennifer's boyfriend, never fully recovered from her death. He completed his engineering degree but never married, never moved away from Louisville. Friends say he carries guilt for not driving to pick Jennifer up that night, for letting her make that drive alone. Rationally, he knows he couldn't have prevented what happened, that Marsh would have found another victim, another opportunity. But grief isn't rational. Love isn't rational. And the weight of what if can crush a person as surely as any concrete truth. Daniel visits Jennifer's grave on her birthday every year, leaves flowers, sits for hours. He never speaks about her publicly, guards his memories like precious, fragile things. In 2005, 16 years after Jennifer's death, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at Patricia's home, forwarded by the prison system. It was from Robert Marsh. Patricia's hands shook as she opened it, debating whether to read it or burn it unread. She chose to read. The letter was short, typed on a prison typewriter, clinical in tone. Marsh wrote that he wanted to provide closure, that he remembered details about Jennifer's final days that might help Patricia find peace. He offered to meet with her to answer questions. Patricia showed the letter to Dr. Mills. who warned that many serial offenders seek contact with victims' families as a form of continued control, a way to remain relevant and powerful even from behind bars. Patricia wrestled with the decision for months. Part of her wanted to know everything, to hear every detail, to understand her daughter's final moments. But another part of her recognized the meeting for what it truly was. Marsh's final attempt to victimize her, to force her into his presence, to make her listen, to exercise power one more time. In the end, Patricia declined. She wrote back a single sentence: "You have taken enough." She never heard from Marsh again. Years later, she would say that refusing him, denying him that final audience, was one of the hardest and most important decisions of her life. She chose her own healing over his need for attention. And in that choice, she reclaimed some of the power he'd stolen. The other families of Marsh's victims formed a support network, a small community bound by shared tragedy. They meet quarterly, share memories of their daughters and sisters, compare notes on how they've learned to carry grief without being crushed by it. Patricia often speaks at these gatherings, emphasizing that survival isn't betrayal, that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. "Jennifer wouldn't want me to stop living," she tells them. "None of your loved ones would." It's a message she has to repeat to herself constantly, a truth that fights against the gravity of loss. The group has become family to each other, the only people who truly understand the specific weight of their shared experience. In recent years, advances in DNA technology and cold case investigation techniques have allowed authorities to link additional unsolved disappearances to Marsh. Remains found in remote areas along his known routes have been tested and identified, giving families answers decades after they'd lost hope. The confirmed victim count now stands at 23, though investigators believe the true number may be higher. Some victims may never be found. Some disappearances may never be definitively connected. Marsh himself has refused to cooperate with these investigations, apparently content to take whatever secrets remain to his grave. His final act of control is silence, withholding closure, maintaining power through absence of information. The highways Robert Marsh used as hunting grounds still carry millions of travelers every year. Truck stops still fill with long-haul drivers and late-night travelers. Young women still drive alone because they must, because life requires mobility and independence. The mechanisms Marsh exploited haven't disappeared. They can't disappear without dismantling the infrastructure of modern American life. So instead, we've tried to make those spaces safer. Better lighting at rest stops, panic buttons in parking lots, increased law enforcement presence, cell phones that track our locations for better and worse. We've adapted, but adaptation isn't the same as prevention. It's acknowledgement that the danger persists, and we're simply trying to reduce it. Patricia Calloway turned 72 last year. Her hair has gone silver, her face marked by time and grief, but her voice remains steady, powerful. She speaks at universities, law enforcement conferences, victim advocacy groups. She tells Jennifer's story over and over, never letting it fade into statistics and forgotten headlines. "Every missing person is someone's entire world," she says. "Every unsolved case is a family trapped in limbo. Every dismissed report is a failure of our promise to protect each other." Her advocacy has influenced legislation, changed protocols, saved lives that will never know they were in danger. Jennifer's death created ripples that continue to spread, touching people who have never heard her name but benefit from the systems created in her memory. There are moments, Patricia admits, when the weight of it all feels unbearable. Moments when she wakes up and forgets, just for a second, that Jennifer is gone. Moments when she reaches for the phone to call her daughter, to share good news or ask advice. The grief doesn't diminish with time, she explains. It just changes shape, becomes something you learn to carry differently. She keeps Jennifer's photo on every wall, surrounds herself with memories, refuses to let absence erase presence. It's her way of saying that Marsh didn't win, that he took Jennifer's life but couldn't take her significance, her impact, her enduring place in the world. Love, Patricia has learned, outlasts death. It just has to find new ways to express itself. The documentary filmmakers, true crime podcasters, and journalists who have told and retold this story over the years have often asked Patricia the same question. How do you forgive? How do you move past such profound injustice and loss? Her answer has remained consistent. "I don't forgive," she says simply. "Forgiveness isn't required for healing. I've chosen to channel my pain into purpose, my anger into action. That's not forgiveness. That's survival." That's making his evil count for something good. It's a perspective that challenges the conventional narratives about grief and recovery, the cultural pressure to forgive and move on. Patricia offers a different path: transformation without absolution, healing without forgetting, peace without surrender. Every year, on the anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance, Patricia drives to that spot where the gas station once stood. She parks in what used to be the lot, walks to approximately where the payphone had been, and makes a phone call. She calls her own number, leaves a message for herself, telling Jennifer's story in brief, saying her daughter's name out loud, declaring that she's still remembered, still loved, still missed. It's a ritual that probably seems strange to outsiders, but it makes sense to Patricia. That phone call was the last bridge between Jennifer's life and her death. By recreating it, by using it as a moment of remembrance rather than an ending, Patricia reclaims it. She refuses to let Marsh's violence be the final definition of that moment. Robert Eugene Marsh is 67 years old now, housed in a maximum security facility in Pennsylvania. He'll die there, decades from now, having spent the majority of his life behind bars. Some might see this as justice, as sufficient punishment for unforgivable crimes. But others, particularly the families of his victims, see it differently. He's alive. He breathes, eats, sleeps, exists. Their daughters don't. The scales can never truly balance. Justice, in cases like this, is an approximation, a gesture toward fairness in a situation where fairness is impossible. We lock away the monsters we catch, create systems to prevent future horrors, and tell ourselves we've learned, we've adapted, we're safer now. Sometimes that's even true. The legacy of Jennifer Calloway's case extends far beyond criminal justice reform. It's become part of the cultural conversation about women's safety, about the calculated risks women take every day simply moving through the world. The mental checklist: keys between knuckles, parking in well-lit areas, sharing locations with friends, the constant low-level vigilance that men rarely have to maintain. Jennifer did many things right that night. She called her mother. She stopped at a public place. She was aware of her surroundings, but none of it mattered when she encountered a predator who'd perfected his methods over years of practice. The harsh truth is that individual caution can only do so much against systematic hunting. Safety requires collective change, not just personal responsibility. In 2019, 30 years after Jennifer's disappearance, a true crime podcast revisited the case, interviewing Patricia, Dr. Mills, retired investigators, and family members of other victims. The podcast became enormously popular, reaching millions of listeners worldwide, introducing Jennifer's story to a new generation. Some criticized this, arguing that true crime entertainment exploits tragedy, turns suffering into content. Patricia disagrees. As long as they tell the truth, she says, as long as they say her name correctly and honor her memory, I want the story told everywhere to everyone. Because somewhere out there, someone is in danger right now. Someone is being approached by a predator. And if hearing Jennifer's story makes them more cautious, makes them trust their instincts, makes them call for help, then her death wasn't meaningless. The National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, NAMUS, contains over 600,000 missing persons cases at any given time. Most are resolved quickly, people found safe or situations explained. But thousands remain open, unsolved, families trapped in the terrible limbo that Patricia knows so well. Some of those cases may involve predators like Marsh, serial offenders who exploit our vast geography and fragmented law enforcement systems. Others involve accidents, misunderstandings, voluntary disappearances. Each represents a story, a life, a network of people desperately seeking answers. Jennifer's case reminds us that these aren't just statistics. They're daughters and sisters, sons and brothers, entire worlds of love and potential. And each one deserves the same serious, immediate, comprehensive response that Jennifer should have received from the beginning. The interstate system, which Marsh used so effectively as a predatory highway, spans over 48,000 miles across America. It's a marvel of engineering, a symbol of freedom and mobility, the literal roads that connect our nation. But like any system, it can be exploited. Long-haul truckers, overwhelmingly good people doing difficult work, have to share those roads with the rare predators who hide among them. The trucking industry has implemented its own reforms since the Marsh case. Better background checks, wellness programs, monitoring systems. But the fundamental reality remains. Millions of miles of highway, millions of vehicles, millions of interactions between strangers. Perfect opportunities for both connection and predation, depending on who's behind the wheel. Jennifer Calloway would be 57 years old today. She might have completed her nursing degree, might have saved lives in hospitals or clinics. She might have married Daniel or someone else or no one at all. She might have had children, grandchildren even. She might have traveled, changed careers, discovered passions she never knew existed. All of that potential, all of those possible futures, ended in a parking lot on a cold March night because she encountered a man who saw women as prey rather than people. This is what murder truly steals. Not just a present, but all the futures that could have been. Not just one life, but all the lives that would have been touched and changed and enriched by that person's presence in the world. Patricia often thinks about alternate timelines, the infinite scenarios where Jennifer lived. What if she'd made that phone call 5 minutes earlier or later, missing Marsh entirely? What if the gas station had been busier, enough people present to deter him? What if Detective Fuller had taken the case seriously from hour one, mobilizing resources immediately? These thoughts are both torture and comfort, reminding her how close Jennifer came to survival while highlighting the cruel randomness of her death. She was unlucky, Patricia says. That's the truth no one wants to hear. Jennifer didn't make mistakes. She wasn't reckless. She was unlucky. She existed in the wrong place at the wrong time near a monster who was very, very lucky until he finally wasn't. The phone, that payphone where Jennifer made her last call, was removed years before the gas station closed. Payphones themselves have largely vanished from American life, made obsolete by cellular technology. The younger generation barely remembers them, these metal and plastic boxes that used to stand on street corners and in stations, anonymous communication nodes. But for Patricia, payphones represent something specific. The last technology Jennifer touched, the last tool she used to reach out for help. Sometimes Patricia wonders what Jennifer would think of modern smartphones, how different that night might have been with GPS and instant messaging, and the ability to live stream or record video. Would it have saved her? Or would Marsh have simply adapted, as predators always do? In the end, Jennifer Calloway's story is about many things. The failure of systems, the persistence of evil, the strength of a mother's love, the slow arc toward justice. But perhaps most importantly, it's about the value of a single life and the ripples that life creates, even in death. Jennifer existed for 23 years. She laughed and studied and loved and dreamed. She called her mother every Sunday. She wanted to be a nurse to help people, to make a difference. And in a way she never could have imagined, she did. The reforms that bear her name have helped protect countless others. The awareness raised by her case has saved lives that will never know they were in danger. Her death was tragedy, but her life and its memory became legacy. Patricia Calloway ends every speech the same way, regardless of audience or venue. She shows a photograph of Jennifer, not the missing person poster or the mugshot from evidence, but a candid photo from Christmas 1988. Jennifer laughing at something off camera, her whole face bright with joy. This is who she was, Patricia says. Not a victim, not a case number, not a cautionary tale, a person. A daughter, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. Remember her this way. And remember that behind every unsolved case, every missing person report, every cold case file is someone's Jennifer, someone's whole world. Don't let them become invisible. Don't let them become statistics. Say their names, tell their stories. Keep them alive in memory since we couldn't keep them alive in life. If you're traveling alone tonight, no matter who you are or where you're going, someone loves you. Someone is waiting to hear that you've arrived safely. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Call someone, stay in public spaces, don't be embarrassed to ask for help. Your life is precious, irreplaceable, worth protecting. Jennifer Calloway didn't have all the tools and awareness we have today. She did her best with what she knew. Honor her memory by being smart, being safe, being alive. Because somewhere out there, on some highway or in some parking lot, another predator is waiting, hunting, hoping we've forgotten the lessons Jennifer's death taught us. Don't let her story be forgotten. Don't become the next story that needs to be told. Thank you for listening. Stay safe. And never ignore that last phone call. What happens when an entire town conspires to keep a terrible secret? When police refuse to investigate, when witnesses recant, when truth becomes the most dangerous thing you can speak? That story is coming next.